Cheryl, and we created this podcast as the Adult Leadership Advisory Board, or ALAB. Who we are in terms of ALAB is a group that focuses on issues, challenges, and difficult topics facing our community. We are working hard to develop educational programming, social tools, and fundraising initiatives to inform, include, and support adults with cystinosis, but ultimately anybody in our community, our friends, our families, our neighbors, and anybody that might or might not be affected by cystinosis. We, as the Adult Leadership Advisory Board, are funded and work under the Cystinosis Research Network. For those of you out there who might not necessarily understand or know what cystinosis is characterized by the accumulation of the amino acid, or one of the amino acids, cysteine, within the cells. When the cysteine builds up in the cells, it often forms crystals and will sometimes attack certain organs and tissues, predominantly the kidneys, but also includes the eyes, muscles, thyroid, brain, pancreas, and testes. Previously, it was known that an individual born with cystinosis would not live past 10. It's pretty grim, and I'm sure many families out there were quite devastated when they had a newborn who was diagnosed with this disease, cystinosis. However, today we have members in our community living well past 50 years old.
Hello, and welcome to Cystinosis Rare, a journey into the unknown. I'm your host, Steve Schleuder, and with me are hosts Jana, Healy, Sara, Healy, and Briana Dundon. And our guests are...
Hi, my name is Levi Peterson, and I'm a patient navigator with the Patient Helpline, as well as the resource coordinator. I am also a rare disease patient with Behcet's and Idiopathic Intracranial Hypertension, and it's been a pretty crazy past 8 years of being a patient. And, I'm very excited to hopefully unveil some different life hacks and different things to kind of help people out in dealing with their conditions. And I'll leave it over to Sam.
And my name is Samantha Sauer. I am the director of the Patient Helpline and also a patient navigator. I'm also a rare disease patient with more than a handful of some fun diseases that I get to live with every day, and I'm happy to be here.
Hi, I'm Deanna Javier. I work full-time as a paraprofessional. I have ankylosing spondylitis and a handful of other illnesses. And I'm also a mother to a beautiful daughter who has a few developmental disabilities.
Okay, thanks guys for being on here with us. So our topic is work-life balance with a chronic illness, and I'm gonna pass over the mic to Sara.
Our first question is, what are some tips that you can give our listeners on how to manage work balance and life with a chronic condition?
I feel like the best place to start is probably talking about boundaries. And if there's one person that I know more than anyone else who's very good at making sure we always maintain our employment boundaries in the world of rare diseases, I would say that's Sam. So I'm going to let her talk about that.
She says that because I set her boundaries for her earlier today.
She did.
But I think talking about a work-life balance, even though I'm good at setting boundaries, I also don't really have one. It's something that comes, I think, with a lot of practice, especially for Levi and myself. When, we work with patients, we are patients. So we hear a lot of really heartfelt stories, sometimes some really heart-wrenching stories from patients all day long. And a lot of times that can be very overwhelming when you have your own issues on top of listening to a lot of other people's chronic issues. Basically, day in and day out, 5 days a week, you have to kind of find a place where you can step outside of that so you don't get completely burnt out by trying to help other people and forget to help yourself. One of the things that we do is make sure to talk to each other throughout the day. So we're not getting not necessarily too involved, but not overly stuck and involved where we can't get out of that space. Have somebody that you can talk to about that, especially given what we do all the time, and work on setting your boundaries. That's one thing that I did not have when I first started this job. And now I am as Levi said, the one to go to set boundaries, because I know how bad it can get and how burnt out you can get when you don't set them. So, I have a time in the day when I don't take calls after a little while because I need to let my brain start to slow itself down at the end of the day and really focus on what I need to focus on. And when I clock out, I try to tell myself that I am done for the day, but sometimes I'm bad at that too.
You have to be very, very strict with yourself. And I think that that's something that patients have such a hard time doing, because we have this tendency to feel like we're not doing enough. So then we overdo it. We end up going into full weekend warrior syndrome, like whether it's mentally or physically, because at that point, you're just so exhausted from listening to everyone else's problems, everyone else's everything going on in the world, that by the time it comes time to take care of yourself, you don't want to call your doctor. You don't want to call your insurance. You don't want to call the Social Security Administration. You don't want to talk to anybody. And the burnout that people experience is something that is so common, and a lot of times it can sneak up on you, and a lot of times it'll sneak up before you even realize that it's even remotely getting to that extent. And it happens to Sam and I would say pretty frequently, but for us, we, just like she said, we try to do everything we can to kind of make sure that we're communicating, because if you're not able to communicate with your coworkers, the people that you're seeing every day about this, it's kind of nice to have a buddy. It's kind of nice to have someone in your work environment who kind of knows what's going on and can sort of help you out when your boss is asking a lot of questions about, like, where are they? Why are they late today? Like, it's nice to have a Sam. That way, you can always kind of have someone having your back. But just really making sure to monitor how exhausted you actually are, and really taking into account how you feel, and not allowing yourself to guilt yourself into doing more than you can. Because you're already doing more than enough, and anything that you're doing at this point is valid. I don't care if it's something as simple as doing a part-time job on the internet doing data entry, or even what Sam and I do at the helpline. Like, we're all contributing in our own ways. So it's just allowing yourself to feel fulfilled in your contribution, and shutting all of the negativity and anything else out of your mind.
Oh, I completely agree, Levi. And my favorite tip that I am terrible at following is resting. Yep. I notice like a big difference, like when I don't rest and I push myself, like I just crash. And like that's something I've been working on recently. Like I need to rest, and like I might have to lower my standards at home. Like it's okay if like, the laundry's not done today. It's okay if the dishes pile up for a day. It's not going to be forever. It's okay. And I can ask for help. Like I'm learning how to ask for help, like from my husband and my daughter. And like my daughter's at the age where she can do chores, which is great.
Yeah, you can never be afraid to ask for help. I think, honestly, working at the helpline made me less afraid to ask for help, as crazy as that sounds. Work at the helpline, maybe ask for help more. But, I've always been the kind of person where whenever I'm dealing with something, especially like with my condition, I tend to get very closed off. I tend to get very distant. And when you're around other patients, they kind of notice. So, like I said, I've been very, very fortunate, to have people in my work environment to kind of pull me out of it when it's getting a little too heavy. But it's still a lot to have to balance. But when it comes to the resting piece of it and making sure that you are asking for help, you are asking for that support, I think is the biggest thing. And knowing that there's never any shame in asking help. It's not quitting. It's not defeatist. It's actually your way of saying that you want to keep going. So I think asking for help, people should find strength and empowerment in that.
I think after just listening to both of you guys, I think like I myself being like first time homeowner, my husband and I we've been married for about a year and a half, and working from home, like you can see the things that have piled up, right? Like if you're going to an office, it's not in your face all the time. It's not staring at you. Like the dishes aren't there. The laundry is not there. You can kind of pull yourself away from it and it's not a constant reminder. And I actually went through that this week where I'm like, I feel like I'm failing at everything. I feel like I'm failing being a wife, being like a good housekeeper, all this stuff. I'm like, it's just not there. My mom was like, prioritize. Like, this is not, it doesn't matter right now. And not that I finally started doing it, but I'm trying to be better about talking to my husband about that. And he's very good at, you know, helping me with stuff. He will notice something like what Levi was saying when I need a little bit of help without necessarily me having to ask, but getting better at asking for help. But it is hard, especially when you have a chronic condition. I think we actually get kind of conditioned that we have to do this on our own, like, because it's our body, we're fighting it, right? So you get that mentality of like, I have to do this, I have to keep pushing through this, forgetting to rest, forgetting to take care of things, forgetting that you are the first thing and you are your priority. I'm great at reminding Levi about that, not great at reminding myself. So we're all a work in progress in that regard, I think.
Yeah, I think the only last bit of advice I'd give for this particular question is not ever being afraid to delegate and learning to delegate. Because when it comes to things at work, I know it's really, really easy to kind of slip into the whole, well, if I want it done right, I need to do it myself. And it's a very dangerous mentality to have, because as much as you want to do absolutely everything, you can't. You just absolutely can't. That's just not how life works, especially when you're chronically ill, you're dealing with all these things. You're just going to stress yourself out more. And I always, future Levi also gets very upset with past Levi when past Levi makes plans and it volunteers themselves to do all these different things. And then all of a sudden I look at my calendar and go, why did I do that? What was the purpose of this? Why did I want to do this to myself? So just always make sure you're delegating so future you doesn't yell at past you in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It makes sense, I promise.
Yeah, no, I get that. I have the same thing that happens sometimes where future Steve gets mad at past Steve for making plans to do stuff and too much and then I can't do it.
It's always like several days in a row and you're like, why did you say yes to that? You saw an opening on that day, so you put 3 things?
Yeah.
You have to remember to count your spoons. We all kind of, I feel like some people try to get away from the spoon theory because some of us are kind of like fed up with it. We're like, oh my God, the spoons again. They're going about the spoons. So it's like, I feel like we need to find like a different theory to have to kind of spice things up and shake it up a little bit. But it's still that same idea of you kind of have to count your energy and make sure that you're saving enough for tomorrow. You're saving enough for the rest of the week. It's look at your week as a whole, or even just look at your month. Like take time to actually sit down, look at your calendar and say, well, that one's going to be a tough week. Maybe I should put in a rest day in the middle of the week to make sure that when it comes time to go to the weekend and I want to go to that wedding, or I want to go see my parents, or I want to hang out with my friends, that you're not going to feel like garbage and that you'll actually be able to do that. Because also you need to have balance between your work life and have time for your social life too. Because you can't be a full-time patient, be working full-time, and then have no time for anything else outside of that. You have to live too. You have to get the opportunity to actually go out and do the things that you want to do. So it's like, as much as it's so important to manage the work life, make sure you're taking the time preventatively to make sure that you're able to do the things you want to do on the weekends and in your free time.
Second everything you said, Levi. Like I have my planner and I'll go over like my schedule with my husband, and like we just look at everything and we make sure we don't overschedule our daughter with like activities. And it's like, okay, like we're just going to take a break this weekend. Yeah.
We love the good parenting. We stand.
Yeah.
That's one of the troubles I have is delegating. I work in a kitchen, so I'm on my feet a lot. And I have that mentality of, well, if I want it done right, I got to do it myself because no one else knows how to do it the way I do.
Especially in cooking, I mean.
Yeah. So
I don't blame
I will do all that stuff, and the only problem with that is that makes my boss rely on me much more, to the point where there was a time when I needed a biopsy on my kidney, and he wouldn't let me take the next day off. He had me come in, and I told him all the restrictions I would have. I said I can't lift anything. I basically can just stand there. And he's like, that's all right. I'll bring you stuff, and you can just chop it up. I'll just bring you things, and you can just have me lift it and have me put it away for you.
Do I need to set your boundaries? Because I will do that if you need.
Right? Like, it's like, as much as we
like,
appreciate,
so much pain.
Thanks for bringing me stuff, but like, let me stay home. That's like when you get into a car crash on your way to work because you hit a deer and it's like 2:00 in the morning. You're going to your night shift and you call your boss and you're like, "Hey, I hit a deer," and they're like, "Cool. What time are you going to be at work?" And you're like,
"Yeah, that's how my boss is." You can ask Sara. She worked there for like a year and then she quit. But that's just how he is. He's become so reliant on me that if I'm not there, he's texting me, asking me. After 5 minutes, I'm 5 minutes late. He's like, "Where are you?" I'm like, I'm in my car. I'm like 2 minutes away.
Yeah, so I need to set your boundaries. Got it. Okay, we'll talk later. I got it.
A little talk after the show.
I'm setting her boundaries. Like, if Sean texts her, I say, "You tell him you can't come in."
Do I need to write a note from my desk?
You might have to. It might have to be like an intervention.
Break out the old lethal poison pen.
I mean, just get a doctor's note. Like, I've had to ask for doctor's notes before.
Yeah, I've brought doctor's notes before, and he's always like, "Okay, so how long will you be gone, and when can you come back?" And I'm like, he did that when I had a shunt put in. He was asking when I would come back. I said, "Well, a shunt, I need a few weeks. I need maybe a month or two to recuperate. I won't even be able to lift anything without straining myself." And he's just like, "Oh, okay. We'll have to find someone to cover." I'm like, "Yeah."
Yeah, as a shunted patient myself, I feel that. It was really hard to kind of explain to doctors kind of how brain surgery works and why you need literally 6 months to recoup, especially since you can't drive for 6 months and do half things you would need to do to be able to go to work because you have to worry about seizure risk. Kind of a big thing there. But I think the other thing I want to point out with this, because it's like there's a whole different layer here that I don't want to miss, and it's because when you talk about this particular boss, it sounds like he's trying to be accommodating, but in the most toxic way possible, to where it's you're kind of gaslighting this person in a way to be like, "Well, you're just so good at your job. You're just the best." And then that makes you feel good, and you're like, "Okay, I'm important. I'm really cool. Like, you need me to be here." But it's it's a little bit manipulative in that regard, because what are patients looking for the most when we're down on our luck? We're looking for that validation, that feeling special, feeling like we're still giving something to the world, because we feel like we're not. Because deep down, we're just so depressed and so upset with all the things that are going on that, of course, when someone says that to us, we're going to bend over backwards to try and do everything we can to make that person happy. So it's like, I just want to make sure that you know in your heart of hearts that you do not have to do any of that, and that you are fully valid without having your boss gas you up and make you feel special, because you're special regardless. So just don't feel the need to go out of your way to beat yourself up and force yourself to go to work. If there's ever a day that you can't, don't allow people to try to bargain with you. And if I do this, can you do this? No, it's just a flat no. It's a flat, I need to rest. I'm learning, Sam. See, I listen.
I was just going to say she's learning. I'm so proud. Normally, I have to tell her this. Like, when you were talking about time blocking the schedule before, I'm like, yeah. And then, like, at 1 p.m, she's like, "I'm so overworked. Why did you say yes?" I don't know. Like, but you're learning. I am too. Like, I smack myself in the head. I'll tell Levi to go do something, and I don't do it. So
I still don't do it.
Yeah,
I
I gotta learn to
selectively.
say no. It's so hard to do, though. It is so
It really
hard for me.
is.
I'm kind of like a people pleaser in a way. You can ask Sarah. I pretty much, when I get home from work, I'm tired, but I need to take out the recycling or the trash or the laundry needs to be put away, or I need to take my dog for a walk, or I keep thinking about all the things I need to do while I'm sitting there trying to rest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm the complete opposite. I like to relax.
So do we.
I'll get home from work and then I'll take the dog to the park, and then after that I just relax. I have to relax, or else I'm just going to be super stressed.
Just always make sure that you're kind of penciling in time to relax. And if you find that you don't have time to relax, schedule it. Because that's one thing I've started doing where, and yes, this is also Sam advice. Like, I feel like I'm just going to gas up Sam this whole episode. If that's how it's going to go, it is. Like, whatever.
But secretly, no one can know that I don't do any of the stuff I tell y'all to do. It's fine.
We block out time for naps. We block out time for rest, which I appreciate that I have, like, that kind of trustworthy friendship.
So,
To be fair, like, literally, I think the worst place I've ever tried to force myself to fall asleep in was in a laundry bag in boot camp because I was desperate. Don't ever let yourself get to laundry bag level desperate, okay? Schedule your rest, kids.
Yep.
Sounds like a t-shirt.
And yes, I did get caught.
Okay. The next question is, has your chronic condition affected what work you've chosen to do?
Absolutely.
Yep.
1000%.
Yeah, with Levi and I think the reason we do what we do is I don't want to say because we're sick, but it's because we're sick. Like, we wouldn't be here if we weren't patients. You know, it was one of those things where you think about, like, when you're diagnosed with something and, you know, you can't work. Most of us either can only work part-time or certain jobs or anything like that. And it's like, you feel like everything was kind of taken away from you in a lot of ways. I feel like my job in particular, and I know not everybody can say this, it was something that was given to me in this situation. It was something that being sick brought me to, which has brought me really great opportunities. I've met a lot of people. I've got great friends. You know, we have a great, well, our meetings get a little fun sometimes, but, you know, we have great ideas. We have a lot of good stuff that comes out of it. And it's like, of all the things that get taken away from us, the job that I have was one of the things that I was given being sick, and, like, one of the things I was happy to be given, not any of the other, like, crap symptoms that it likes to give me. I liked this one. I'd like to keep this one. The other ones are returned to sender.
Yeah, I feel like I got really, really lucky, because it was hard on me when I first became disabled because I was a firefighter EMT. That was what I always wanted to do. It was my dream. Like, I wanted to become a flight medic. Like, that's where I saw myself. Like, I wanted to live in the city and find a fire station and settle down. And, you know, it just, everything happened so quickly and so suddenly. And I went from being, like, a somewhat, I wouldn't say perfectly healthy because I was always a little messed up, but, you know, it just went from just being this mostly healthy young adult to all of a sudden I'm blind, I'm having brain surgery every day of my life, I'm having spinal taps, like, all the time, and you just kind of wake up and you can't do the job that you wanted anymore, and your dreams change. And, you know, I think for the first year of it, when I was getting used to it, I was really depressed. I was really upset. But I kind of had to instead reframe it and be like, okay, I can't run into burning buildings anymore. I can't physically save people the way I used to. So how do I do it now? How do I kind of modify me to sort of fit what I want to do, but to make sure that I can do it without causing like any physical harm to myself. And that's kind of how I fell into patient advocacy, because I'd always had an interest in politics and different stuff. So when I found Nord, when I started kind of going through like down the rabbit hole of like rare diseases, that's sort of where I found them. And then I found the community in Instagram, and it kind of took off from there. And that's how I met Jim and then eventually Sam. And so it's really lucky the way that it turned out, but it was such a huge shift. And I feel like there are some people with rare conditions that are able to keep their jobs, and there are some that aren't. And neither person is any less valid than the other. I remember early on in like the early years of like when I first got diagnosed with IIH, I'd be on like the Facebook groups, right? And people would be like, "Oh, like what do you do for work?" Like what was your career? And you start, kind of talking about these different things, and they're like, "Well, I'm a fitness trainer and I still work." And I'm like, "Okay, but are you lifting like 200-pound people and pulling them out of buildings?" And they're like, "Well, no," but it's just like, "Okay, are you wearing 75 pounds of extra gear?" They're like, "Well, no." And it's like, "Okay," like then chill. Like everyone's very, very different. So anyone that's listening to this who's in that part of their journey where they're trying to figure out whether or not they're going to be able to stay in the job that they're in, or if they want to try to go back to work or any of that, it really, it all comes down to you. And, you just don't allow yourself to feel bad if you're not able to still lead a highly physical career. There are other alternatives. There's other options. You can reach out to me and Sam will give you ideas. Like there's things that you can do to still have that fulfillment that you're searching for. And I know it's really hard to find, but that's why we already did all the sucky stuff. That way you don't have to. We suffered, that way you guys can hopefully just get the links from us to the different pages and apply and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I've definitely had to change my work situation a little bit. I'm at least still able to work with kids, but I used to work with like toddlers and preschoolers, but like I just don't have the energy to like chase the little ones around. But now I work at a elementary school, and it's nice because it's more structured, and like I just work all over the building as a paraprofessional, and like there's a bit of walking and whatnot, but like it's nice. The like rooms have chairs, and like the kids are calm, and I don't have to chase them. But I still find my work like fulfilling, and like in some ways this is actually more fulfilling than when I was working with younger kids, because like I'm helping them like with their struggles with reading and math, and just like they actually even sometimes like inspire me, and like they teach me more patience. So like it kind of like it was a bummer that I had to stop working with like the younger kids, but I'm really glad to be where I'm at, and I hope that like I can keep working here, and like I just hope that my health stays somewhat stable enough to keep working.
Yeah. And you feel like, do you have like a good support system at that job, do you feel? Like if you needed to be able to go and talk to them about accommodations and everything?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like this is
Awesome.
probably like the best like work situation I've been at. Like I can be honest with my boss and the teacher I work under, and like I can talk to my coworkers and not worry about them like gossiping about my health like I like had in a different workplace.
I feel like that's got to be really, I feel like frustrating isn't like big enough of a word for that type of situation. Like Levi and I are in a very unique situation where like I've known, one of our coworkers for over a decade. So he's been in my life since I basically got sick, so I don't need to explain to him like what gastroparesis is, or why I might be answering emails from the bathroom floor today, because that's just as far as my energy, is going to bring me. I never had to go through that once I got sick. Before that, I worked with my mom, which obviously I didn't really need to explain anything to my mom. Why I couldn't, come in at 8 o'clock. I was coming in at 10 instead. And my other job was super flexible, and it was remote too. So like I didn't really, with other actually chronic illness patients. So I feel like I didn't get that exposure in the sense where I had to explain like what chronic illness is and how it affects people as an employee to an employer or coworkers. So I can't imagine feeling like I'm in a situation where people are just not supportive, or instead of saying, or asking questions, that you're sitting here wondering, like, what are they saying behind my back, or my boss isn't listening to me. Like, I know that there have got to be people out there that have gone through that, and why they're not as open with having chronic illnesses because of that. Like, you're afraid of the repercussions that come with that. And I remind myself often that we are incredibly lucky where we are to work for an organization that understands, patients and works with patients. So I don't have to re-explain, like, hey, I'm septic, I'm in the hospital, like, I can't come in tomorrow. And they're like, well, what about the following day? Like, nobody's giving me that. And they yelled at me for working while I was in the hospital septic. I told you my work-life balance I'm working on it. But, I really, it's got to be very, very daunting to be in that situation for a lot of people. And I wish it wasn't, because you shouldn't have to hide that for fear of repercussions, fear of being like outcasted, fear of just people not treating you the same, or just making you feel like lesser of a person, because knowing that there's a chronic illness with this person didn't change in that 30 seconds. Like, they're still the exact same person they were when they had a chronic illness before you knew. And then all of a sudden things change. So that it bothers me. I feel so bad that you had that situation, because nobody should ever have to worry about that. And I know that's part of why we're talking today too, but it's just really disheartening that it still happens when it really shouldn't. If you don't understand something, just ask or walk away. Like, it's not that difficult.
Exactly.
And I can definitely relate to that too, because it's like when I look back at being 22 and being in like an emergency services worker at the time, like, I didn't have any support. Like, the situation that I have at work now is a stark contrast to, shockingly, being involved in emergency services. Because I remember going to coworkers, going to people who I thought were like really good friends of mine, and being horribly sick. And there were times I'd be like, hey, like, I've got like this really crazy rash on my hand. Like, should I leave? Like, what should I do? Because I was still new. I didn't really know that much. Like, I was fresh out of the academy. I didn't have, the vast years of medical knowledge that some people have. And so I'm asking these people who I think have seen it all, and they look at me like I'm crazy. And when I finally got to a point where, like, I'm just horribly sick, and I end up leaving work early, and they were like, oh, well, the rash didn't even look that bad. You're probably fine. You're like all of the gaslighting. And I ended up being sick with hand, foot, and mouth disease for literally 3 months, stuck in the hospital, all this crazy stuff. And that was right before I went blind. That was like right before the IIH kicked off and everything. And even during that time, with getting the shunts placed, doing all these different things, it was a lot of people thinking that I was faking it or exaggerating it. People would Google idiopathic intracranial hypertension, which has a lot of stigma around it, because it was used to be seen as a very like self-limiting, benign condition that you could just fix by losing weight. And that's not true, especially not in all cases. Like, are there cases in which, having excess weight can put, pressure on the vagus nerves and cause that? Of course. But in most cases, no. And they would Google it. They would see, oh, self-limiting, benign. And they'd be like, you're lazy, you suck. And you're just like, okay, like, you have no idea what's going on in my life. And it wasn't until like I had surgery like 5 or 6 that people started to kind of understand and believe that it was important. But then by surgery number 10, they were tired of hearing me talk about it. So it's like, it's that give and take of, like, people, they care until they don't, because it gets to a point where, you're going through this thing and you're trying to get better, but then you don't. And because there's not that gratification and that payoff of, oh, well, they got better, they can't support in that regard. Because they just can't understand. It's completely out of the realm of being understandable. There's some people that don't even realize that chronic illness exists. I think that was the most heartbreaking thing I saw on Twitter was I think like someone famous came out and said they had a chronic illness. And they're like, wait, there's people that get sick and don't get better? And I'm just like, dude, like, yes, there are.
Well, it's the good old, you don't get it till you get it. And at some point you get it and then you realize that you were, really, really ignorant on how that works. So
I always joked that if I died, I was going to told you I was sick on my tombstone. As dark and terrible as that sounds, that is definitely something I would do. I'd probably put like a little voice box in it too. You like put like a quarter in and I'll insult you from beyond.
I'd put a quarter in.
See, I'd be nice to you guys though. I'd be like, oh, hey friend, did you bring me a Happy Meal? Are you coming here to give me an offering of chicken nuggies?
Okay, the next question is, how do you deal with situations where your employer or coworkers start to question your absences at work?
Tell them it's none of their business.
I have a thought, but I'll keep some of it to myself. So
censor the thought. I know it's hard.
But we were talking about doctor's notes before. Like your boss, they're your boss, and they're paying you to be there. So to a degree, they need something, right? Just for the legalities of that, whether it's a doctor's note, you can choose to tell them a little bit more, but I think probably the best thing would be to have a conversation with them about that and, make sure you have documentation. With your coworkers, though, it's really not any of their business to know why. If
you're cool with them,
choose, if something happens like with me now, which obviously everyone has realized at this point that Levi and I are friends. So it's not like it would be weird for me to tell her what's going on. Right. So it's a little different for us, but I still don't have to tell her anything. I'm just like, hey, I'm out on such and such day, or I'm having something, that I need to take care of that's medical. You don't owe anybody an explanation. Though I do think you owe your employer something, but like I said, just for the legalities of it, to make sure really that's more protecting you at the end of the day than it is your employer. So that way, if somebody is questioning your absences or issues or anything like that, or your work performance, oh, you weren't here X amount of days in this period or whatever, you have your doctor's notes. And it's up to you how much you decide to divulge, because, your disabilities, your conditions are nobody's business but your own and whoever you choose to share them with. That's my boundary setting right there. See, I can do it.
Yep.
Just,
No, dude, 1,000%. And I think it's especially important as people who very often end up getting paid to tell our stories. And if you kind of think about it, it's kind of a really messed up thing that we wouldn't have to do in the first place to survive, but here we are. I think it's really important to kind of maintain your privacy in a lot of situations, because we give up so much as patients. We have to literally lay our entire lives bare for our doctors, for our therapists, for our caregivers, all these people involved in every single moving piece of our journeys. And you should be allowed to keep things to yourself if you want to. Don't ever let people pressure you into sharing something that has absolutely nothing to do with them. It's one thing if someone's trying to be a good friend and they're like, hey man, I noticed you haven't been at work and you seem like you're a little pale and you just don't seem like everything's okay. Are you okay? If someone, I'm going to match your energy. If someone comes to me and asks me genuinely if I'm okay, I'm going to tell you genuinely whether or not I am. If you come at me being like, well, where were you? It's well, I was getting tested for cancer. Where were you? You know what I mean? It's really, really, really difficult. So it's I definitely will encourage anyone, if there's ever a time where people are asking too much, whether it's a total stranger, whether it's a coworker, even if it's like that one friend that is kind of close, but not necessarily close enough to where you don't feel like laying out your whole life story, don't feel the need to. Like, you're allowed to keep things for you. We give away so much. Keep some stuff for you.
How would you handle telling your employer about rare disease? Would
I think it would
you leave out some things, or would you just lay it all out?
I think it probably, I hate the answer, it depends, but I feel like that really does fit here because, like, you can have a rare condition that does affect you day to day, but like we were saying before, that some people have rare conditions and a lot of their day to day doesn't change super drastically, or they can get modifications so that they can have a relatively normal day to day. And you've got people in the gray area in the middle, and then you've got like all of us who fall at the other end of that the lucky end of the spectrum here, right? And I think it really would depend on like what your needs are from your employer, whether that's like a flexible schedule or accommodations like maybe hybrid working from home and in the office, or, you know, maybe you have more scheduled breaks. We talked about scheduling breaks earlier. Maybe that's something that you need. Like, it's very individualized to where I don't think there's an umbrella answer there to say, oh, do X, Y, and Z to have a conversation with your employer. Like, you might have a horrible relationship with your employer. And that's where just focusing on like the medicine, like a doctor's note saying that in order for me to do this, like, these are my disabilities, these are the accommodations that I need, getting it from someone other than yourself might be what you have to do to, I don't want to say force their hand, but kind of force their hand. Because if you just say, hey, I have a disability and need this accommodation, they might not listen to you. But if you have, you know, some sort of paperwork from your doctor, they might be more inclined. If you're like in a situation like what Levi and I are in, if something comes up, you know, we just talk about it. But we have that relationship, you know, where it's comfortable to talk about like some of the weird things that happen when you have chronic disease, right? So I think it's really worth having a conversation, actually, to say it this way, with yourself. Like, what do you need from your employer? Like, sit down and say, like, what do I need to be good at my job? What do I need to be mediocre at my job? And what's going to make me like not be able to complete my job if I don't have X, Y, or Z? Like, you have to have that conversation with yourself and meet somewhere in the middle to have the conversation with your employer. And again, if you need to have the conversation with your doctor beforehand to say, these are the accommodations I need, this is the type of job that I have, how can I ask my doctor for that? You know, or how do I ask my employer for that? You know, look at ADA regulations, look at different accommodations that maybe other people have had. Ask the community to say, does anybody work? You know, how did the conversation go with your employer? Again, I can't personally give you what I did because I didn't have that situation. My employer hired me knowing that I have chronic conditions. But I think it really just comes down to being completely honest with yourself. Like, are these accommodations going to allow you to work? Can you still actually work without like harming yourself? Or are you just trying to like fit a square peg in a circle hole here that maybe you need to take a step back and maybe not be working? And even with these accommodations, it might be too much for you right now. Do you need to look for remote work, you know, when you're, you know, going from, I couldn't wait tables the way that I used to. No. I think about that now and I'm like, I used to carry some real heavy trays over my head and I could not imagine being on my feet for as long as I did and carrying all that stuff and running around. I am lucky I remember my medication schedule. I'm not going to be remembering something that somebody else ordered and like do any of that. Like, I could not do that. So if I'm in that job, asking for accommodations isn't going to do anything because I'm not in a place where I can do that job. So you have to really sit down and decide for yourself, what do you need from your employer? And I think that'll help start the conversation going in whatever direction you need it to go to. And to Levi's point, you need to be honest with yourself, because if you can't do that with yourself, how do you expect to have a good, honest conversation with your employer that's going to get you anywhere if you can't even do that with yourself?
Well, I mean, that obviously you have to be extremely honest with yourself in all of this. But I think it also comes down to what point in your medical journey you're also in. Because we have seasons. We all know this. We have some seasons when it comes to our conditions that are harder than others. We also have other things that can pop up out of nowhere and say, hello, I'm here and I'm about to make your life a living hell. So it's like there's all these random things that can happen when it comes to chronic illness. Typically for me, I've always been more of the wait until I need to tell them kind of place. When I've already spoken to my doctors, I've already gotten all my notes together. I'm coming to you with like a manila envelope full of my life is about to be a mess. like that's typically what I try to do is kind of package it all up and do it that way. That way it's kind of easier. But there is a resource I know of, the Job Accommodation Network. Essentially, they can help you with, asking for accommodations when it comes to work. They're fantastic. It was one of the resources we found randomly while we were working, and I've saved it and used it ever since.
Yeah. See, in my case, it's kind of one of the reasons I stay at the job I'm at right now is because with this job, I qualify for medical Medicaid because I'm at poverty level, basically. But I haven't qualified at any other job other than this one because I make just the right amount where I'm right in the in-between. So having medical Medicaid and being fully covered helps me pretty much cover all my medical bills, and I don't want to lose that. That's what scares me.
Understandable. That's why it's so important to also know your substantial gainful amounts when it comes to Social Security. It's going to be different based upon, whether you're blind or not, things like that, since you'll get a little bit more if you have visual issues. But it's always important to know what those numbers are. That way, when you are working, when you are kind of putting everything together, you're never going to endanger your benefits. Because that was something that was always in the back of my head of, oh God, what if I make too much? Especially like when I started working again, because that's what made me not want to go back to work initially. And it's like, I ended up kind of in this cycle of knowing that I needed to get off of Social Security because $900 a month is not enough for a living wage. I'm sorry, especially when I was living in New Jersey where everything is like $1,200 for an apartment to rent. It's just impossible to live on Social Security. And I think the government knows that. I think they're very well aware. So I kind of was pushed into having to go into a new job. So it was really terrifying when I'm starting out. I haven't worked in 8 years, and now all of a sudden like I'm gonna be making this money, and am I gonna lose my benefits? Am I gonna be okay? Like, am I ready to do this? And having a work counselor, I cannot impress upon that enough. Make sure you have a counselor at the Social Security Administration or your local services office, and they can typically help you with a lot of like job accommodations, benefits. It's a lot of counseling work and social work. And I really had a great team that was able to help me make the transition back into working life. So I highly recommend looking into the Ticket to Work programs and becoming very, very familiar with all that literature, because it's something that can really, really save you in a pinch.
Yeah, that's something that, we can help with at the helpline too. And it's something both Levi and I went through myself. Like when she started going through it, I had already been through it. So I knew where to go, what to, the questions to ask, what to do, who to talk to, and how to work through that situation. And it's not easy to make that decision to go back to work, whether you're forced into it or maybe you're a little bit better, but you're not better. We all know that. We all understand anyone with a chronic condition understands like chronic means forever. It's not our fault that other people don't understand that, but you might be better enough that you can handle a little more, or get a job that can fully accommodate everything that you need, or at least enough of what you need to keep you safe, keep you employed, and is flexible to, you know, your health needs. And, you know, having somebody work that entire situation through from start to finish for you, understanding the system, understanding the numbers, understanding where you're at, what the start date is, what the ticket to work program is, what all of that is, and what it means to try to work when you are on disability, and if you are getting benefits, and are you going to lose your benefits? And if you do lose your benefits, is the job that you're working going to sustain your lifestyle, whether your lifestyle, you look at it as just your medical bill, you know, that's it. So, and food and everything else, like those are all of the things that, again, goes back to having that honest conversation with yourself. Like, is this something that I want to try to do? Is this something that I can try to do? What do I need in order to try to do this? Do I have a support system behind me that can help me go through this? If I fail at this, which if you fail, it doesn't mean that like you're a failure. It just means that you weren't ready. What do I do then? If I try and I can't keep going, then what do I do? If I try again and I can't keep going, what do I do? You know, it's like you have to constantly have that conversation and be honest with yourself about what you're doing and how you're going to do it to keep yourself safe. And if you're in a job that is the only job that you can get and you want to stay there and you're okay staying there, there's nothing wrong with doing that, but set boundaries with your boss.
Yeah. And truly be blunt with yourself in those honest moments, because I feel like there have been times in my past where I'd be like, oh, well, I can probably do this, and oh, I can probably do that. If the word probably is in the sentence, don't do it. Like 9 times out of 10, don't do it. Because you're trying to do everything that you can to go back to normal, and you can't. Like, you just have to learn to adapt to what it is now. A lot, especially for me, like I try way too hard to go back to the past and to be the person that I used to be and to have the energy I used to have and do all the things I used to do, but that's just not my reality now. And I feel like it's very tough sometimes for people to have that brutal honesty, because we want so badly to be the miracle and to be inspired, because society kind of pushes that onto us, that as disabled people, as chronically ill people, we need to be inspiring and positive. And, you know, you can be inspiring and you can be positive without harming yourself in the process. You can do that by actually taking care of yourself as a human, loving yourself, and making sure that you're collecting your mentals and taking care of yourself.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Hard to do for me, but it's something I need to start doing.
Yeah,
I got you.
Don't feel bad
you.
about it. It's hard for like almost everyone, I think.
All of us here are in the same boat, and I think that's what makes this experience so cool and so chill. Because we all understand, we've all been there. We've all kind of been up against the wall going, how am I going to live? How am I going to have an actual quality of life? Because it's obviously we're going to live. We're going to keep going. We're going to do our thing until we're not. But, you know, how do I actually just thrive? How do I enjoy what I have now and like just let go? How do I learn to love this? How do I learn to love, like, obviously you're never going to love being sick. And if you do, you're going to talk to somebody about that. But I know there's some people who do. Munchausen by proxy. It's crazy. But, like, you know.
How do you deal with all the stress?
You don't.
We don't.
We don't.
We don't.
We play video games and we collect Pokemon cards. I spend money on frivolous things and then I feel better.
Oh man.
You know, we're joking, but we're not.
Yep. So the last question.
Okay. How do you balance being a working parent with a rare condition? So this is more towards Deanna because she's the only parent.
Mhm.
Well,
And you,
besides me,
Brianna.
so yeah, besides me.
Well, it helps to like keep a good schedule. I depend on my planner to know what's going on. I try to like schedule in rest days and like I try to recognize my limits because sometimes like I'm just gonna have lazy days like after work or like on the weekend. So I just try to make it fun, like so I can still spend time with my daughter. Like we can color and listen to an audiobook, or like we can cozy up on the couch and watch TV, or just like read books in bed, like and then like to make up for it, like I'll like plan in advance, like to do fun but simple activities, because like I still want to spend time with my daughter and whatnot. And then it also helps like to have my husband help take her to appointments. Like we'll split like because she has like a few developmental disabilities, and she'll have a lot of appointments, and like we just need to split it. And like because I used to do like all of them, but I started speaking up for myself. I'm like, hey, like you need to help out. You need to take her to some of these appointments because like I can't do it all.
Yeah, absolutely.
Understandable.
Mhm.
It's
See,
like
I have a hard time doing that as a parent. Like, I feel like I have to take her everywhere. I
Mhm.
mean, I want to keep her busy because she has trouble with peer interactions, and the more activity she has, the therapist says, the better she'll be able to interact with kids, hopefully, as she gets older, because she does have a form of autism as well. So there's struggles there.
Yeah, but you also have to like keep yourself healthy, your like keep your mental health. Like I understand like the desire to like have your kids signed into like all this stuff, and like I get that, like, you know, having like therapists tell you like have them be on more play dates or more activities, which like those are important, but like you really need to find that balance, because like if you're like running on empty, like you can't give your child like the best of you, you know?
Right.
Mhm.
And I have a very hard time. I'm still working on that.
Oh no, yeah, I totally understand. Like sometimes I like will push myself like trying to give my daughter too much, and it's like, wait, I need to like dial it back. It's okay if like my daughter doesn't get the moon. Like as long as I love her and like give her her basic needs, like she's gonna be okay.
Right.
Well, you guys sound like awesome parents, so I hope that you are
Yeah.
both being very kind to yourselves and not making yourselves feel bad when you're going through things and when you need time to rest. I mean, I'm not a parent. Sam is not a parent. Probably neither one of us will ever be parents due to our own fun, crazy things with medical. But don't ever be afraid to have your kids be around you when you are sick. Because when I think about the relationship I have with my mom and the flip side of that, you know, being able to have your kid in your life in that way, I think is really important because A, they're going to grow up understanding that you're sick. They're going to grow up being empathetic and actually caring about how other people feel when they are sick. And it's like it's kind of a teachable moment that's happening in your house every single day of your life. You have this opportunity to actually teach your kids empathy.
Oh, for sure.
And I think it can be such a beautiful bond to have with family when you're going through medical stuff. And it's like the one good thing for me that honestly like came out of all the stuff that happened with me was how close I am to my mom as a result. And I know that probably any kid being able to have that feeling like with their parent, like to be able to just have like that person that's your best friend that you know better than anybody else in the world and being able to support each other that way, I think is just the most special thing. So just never be afraid to let your kids see you vulnerable. I know that a lot of times, you know, whether it's as parents or even us as patients, we're terrified of letting people see us be sick. We're terrified of people seeing us down and out. We don't like people seeing us when we're weak because we're so used to having to be strong. And we're also scared that if people see us in moments of weakness, that maybe they'll start getting scared too, and then it'll all just get too real. I think that there's a beauty to that vulnerability, and I think being able to have that realism and being able to confide is really important. So just don't ever be afraid to be vulnerable. Don't ever be scared that your kid's not going to like you, or that they're gonna be like, mommy's sick. Like, yes, mommy is sick, but you know, it doesn't have to be everything. And I don't think kids have that weird way of just seeing everything as like all one thing. So just never be afraid.
Oh, my daughter loves like the movie days. Like, let's get some popcorn.
So cute.
See, my daughter she doesn't really know. I haven't really been sick around her. Just kind of like, she doesn't understand exactly what I have. And at her age, like developmentally, she's also behind. So I'm trying to figure out like what's a good age or how much to tell her now and when she's older. You know what I mean? That's what I'm struggling with.
Oh, gonna say just, tell her that you have some health issues and like you need to go to the doctor, take medicines. Like you don't have to go into detail, but like I think kids grasp more than we understand. And like my daughter also has some developmental like delays, and I just keep it simple. And she's like, oh, okay, like mom has this problem, but it's okay.
But don't be surprised when they end up being extremely observant and pick up things that you didn't tell them. Because that is definitely something I've seen kids do, especially when it comes to this kind of stuff.